Listen closely. Respecting yourself in front of toxic people is not about proving anything to them. It's not about winning arguments, changing minds, or getting validation from those who thrive on draining you. The real power move is internal. The moment you shift your mindset, toxic people lose their control over you. They only have power when you react, when you explain yourself, when you shrink to keep the peace. Today is about standing tall without saying much, protecting your energy, and choosing self-respect over approval. This is the mindset that changes everything. Toxicity survives on attention, emotion, and reaction. It doesn't grow from logic, fairness, or honest conversation. A toxic person is rarely interested in understanding your point of view or resolving an issue. What they want is control over your emotional state. They poke, provoke, criticize, and belittle not because you are wrong, but because they want to see you lose balance. The moment you react with anger, defensiveness, or desperation to be understood, you hand them power. Your emotional response becomes their reward. That is why self-respect begins not with louder words, but with restraint. When you react, you step into their frame. You start playing a game designed for you to lose. Toxic people are skilled at dragging conversations in circles, twisting facts, and pushing buttons they already studied. Staying calm is not weakness, it's strategy. Silence, composure, and controlled responses communicate something far stronger than shouting ever could, that you are not available for manipulation. Calmness tells them they don't control you. Consistency tells them their tactics don't work. Over time, this starves the toxicity, because without reaction, there is no fuel. This mindset shift is powerful because it places responsibility back where it belongs. You stop trying to change them and start protecting yourself. You recognize that not every comment deserves a response, and not every provocation deserves your energy. Emotional discipline becomes a form of self-respect. It allows you to choose your battles wisely and conserve your focus for things that actually move your life forward. When you stop reacting, you stop bleeding for people who benefit from your pain. There is also dignity in restraint. Responding calmly or not at all sends a message that your self-worth is not dependent on someone else's opinion. You don't need to defend your value to someone who is committed to tearing it down. Your peace becomes your power, and that power quietly shifts the dynamic. Toxic people often escalate at first when they lose access to your emotions, but eventually they reveal themselves or fall away because they can no longer get what they came for. For example, imagine a coworker who constantly criticizes you in meetings, making subtle jabs to get a reaction. Before, you might argue back, explain yourself, or feel angry all day. Now you respond briefly, calmly, or sometimes not at all, and continue performing consistently. Over time, their comments lose impact, others notice the contrast, and the control they once had over your emotions disappears. That is self-respect in action. Over-explaining is one of the quiet ways people give their power away. It often comes from a good place, the desire to be understood, to be seen fairly, to clear confusion. But when you are dealing with someone who is committed to misunderstanding you, explanations don't bring clarity. They create ammunition. Toxic people don't listen to understand, they listen to respond, twist, and invalidate. Every extra sentence becomes something they can misquote, exaggerate, or use against you later. That's why self-respect requires knowing when silence and simplicity are stronger than long explanations. When you keep explaining yourself, you subconsciously place the other person in a position of authority, as if they get to approve or reject your reasoning. This slowly erodes your confidence. You start second-guessing decisions you already made, justifying boundaries you already earned, and defending values you already live by. Over time, this trains people to believe you owe them access to your thoughts, emotions, and motives. You don't. Clarity is a gift, not a debt. People who truly care about you may ask questions to understand you better. Toxic people ask questions to trap you. The difference is intention. If someone repeatedly ignores your explanations, dismisses your perspective, or uses your words to shame you later, that's your signal to stop talking. At that point, continuing to explain is not communication, it's self-betrayal. Self-respect shows up when you recognize patterns and adjust your behavior accordingly. Short answers and firm boundaries are not cold, they are clean. They show that you trust yourself enough to move without consensus. You don't need to convince. everyone to agree with your choices. Confidence is communicated through action. When your behavior is consistent, your life aligned, and your boundaries enforced, explanations become unnecessary. People may not like your decisions, but they will feel your certainty, and certainty commands respect. There is also freedom in not being understood by everyone. Some people only understand you when they benefit from you. When you stop explaining, you stop performing for approval. You reclaim mental space, emotional energy, and self-trust. This is a powerful mindset shift, realizing that peace comes not from being understood by all, but from understanding yourself clearly. For example, imagine a friend who constantly questions your decision to distance yourself from certain people. You explain once calmly. They mock it, minimize it, and bring it up again later to guilt you. Instead of repeating yourself, you simply say, "This is what works for me," and change the subject. Over time, your consistency makes the conversation unnecessary. You didn't argue, you didn't convince, you respected yourself, and that changed the dynamic. Setting boundaries without apologizing is one of the clearest expressions of self-respect. Boundaries are not walls meant to punish others. They are lines that protect your time, energy, and dignity. When you apologize for them, you send the message that your needs are an inconvenience rather than a priority. Toxic people sense this immediately. They don't see boundaries as guidelines, they see them as challenges. If you sound unsure, guilty, or overly emotional when you set a boundary, they will test it again and again until it collapses. That's why confidence, not explanation, is what makes a boundary real. A boundary is not something you debate or negotiate endlessly. It's a decision you make with yourself first. When you are clear internally, you don't need dramatic announcements or long speeches. You state it once, calmly, and you back it up with action. Toxic people often laugh at boundaries, minimize them, or accuse you of being selfish. This is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's proof that the boundary is working. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will always resist when you finally draw one. Not apologizing is key because an apology implies wrongdoing. Protecting yourself is not wrong. Choosing peace is not wrong. Saying no to disrespect is not wrong. When you stop apologizing, you stop seek permission to value yourself. You also stop inviting arguments. Toxic people thrive on emotional back and forth, but firm boundaries enforced through consistent behavior. Leave them with nothing to push against. You don't raise your voice. You don't justify yourself repeatedly. You simply follow through. Distance is often the most powerful boundary of all. Sometimes explaining, warning, or confronting only feeds the chaos. Stepping back, limiting access, or removing yourself entirely sends a clear message without a single harsh word. Distance says, this behavior doesn't get access to me anymore. It's quiet, controlled, and deeply respectful to yourself. Over time, this shifts your identity in your own mind. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tolerates disrespect and start seeing yourself as someone who protects their standards. This mindset shift is not about being cold or arrogant. It's about alignment. When your words, actions, and self-worth match, people feel it. Some will adjust. Others will fall away. The outcome is a win because you're no longer betraying yourself to keep others comfortable. For example, imagine a family member who constantly calls late at night, criticizes your choices, and ignores your requests to stop. Instead of apologetically explaining again, you say once, calmly, "I won't take calls after 9," and then you stop answering. No arguments, no guilt-filled texts. At first, they push harder. Eventually, the behavior changes, or the distance grows. In both cases, you kept your self-respect intact. Emotional detachment is often misunderstood as coldness or indifference. But in reality, it is a refined form of self-control. Detaching emotionally does not mean you stop caring or become unaware of what's happening around you. It means you stop allowing other people's behavior to penetrate your inner world. You remain mentally present, observant, and clear, but you refuse to absorb disrespect, manipulation, or negativity as something personal. This distinction is critical. When you detach emotionally but stay mentally aware, you gain power instead of losing connection. Toxic people rely on emotional access. They want reactions because reactions confirm influence. Anger, sadness, defensiveness, or the need to prove yourself all signal that they have reached you. Emotional detachment cuts off that access. You still hear the words, but they no longer land the same way. You don't suppress feelings. You simply choose not to let those feelings drive your behavior. This allows you to respond instead of react, which is the foundation of self-respect. Staying mentally engaged is what separates detachment from denial. You pay attention to patterns, tone, and intent. You notice who consistently disrespects you, who drains your energy, and who only shows up when they want something. Because you are not emotionally overwhelmed, your judgment becomes sharper. You can make cleaner decisions about boundaries, distance, or disengagement without guilt or confusion. Emotional detachment creates clarity, not numbness. When insults don't shake you and opinions don't define you, your sense of self becomes stable. You stop outsourcing your worth to external validation. This stability unsettles toxic people. They may escalate at first, using sharper words or guilt tactics because they are used to emotional leverage. But when they realize they can't provoke you, they often lose interest. Without emotional payoff, the behavior has no reward. This mindset also protects your energy. Emotional reactions linger, they replay in your mind, drain your focus, and disrupt your peace long after the interaction ends. Detachment prevents this. You acknowledge what happened, learn from it, and move on without carrying the weight. Time, this becomes a quiet confidence. You don't need to dominate conversations or defend yourself aggressively. Your calm presence does the work. For example, imagine a colleague who regularly makes subtle, demeaning comments about your abilities. Before, you feel insulted all day, replaying the words and feeling the urge to confront them emotionally. Now you note the pattern, respond professionally if necessary, and continue performing at a high level without internalizing the insult. You stay aware but untouched. Eventually, their comments lose force because they no longer reach you, and your self-respect remains intact. Choosing growth over proving a point is one of the hardest and most powerful mindset shifts you can make. The ego wants to win arguments, to be right, to make sure the other person knows they were wrong. Toxic people thrive in that space. Drama gives them relevance. Conflict gives them purpose. And emotional back and forth keeps you tied to them. Growth, on the other hand, is quiet. It happens when no one is clapping, when no one is watching, and when there is nothing to prove. That's why self-respect is built in private, not in heated conversations. When you focus on proving a point, your energy leaks outward. You replay conversations, imagine comebacks, and carry resentment that slows you down. You may win the argument, but you lose time, focus, and peace. Growth demands the opposite. It asks you to redirect that energy into discipline, skill, health, and purpose. Instead of asking, how do I make them understand? You start asking, how do I become better than this situation? That question alone changes your trajectory. Toxic people often stay stuck because drama feels productive to them. It gives the illusion of movement without requiring real change. Growth requires responsibility. It requires you to accept that not everyone will see your side, and that's okay. You don't need validation from people who are committed to chaos. Every time you choose peace over chaos, you strengthen your self-respect. Every time you choose discipline over arguments, you train yourself to think long-term instead of emotionally. This mindset shift also separates ego from purpose. Ego wants recognition now. Purpose is willing to be misunderstood while building something meaningful. When you stop reacting and start progressing, you outgrow the version of yourself that once tolerated disrespect just to feel heard. You don't become cold, you become focused. Your silence is not weakness, it's investment. You're investing in a future where your results speak louder than explanations ever could. Over time, this creates a powerful contrast. While others are stuck replaying the same conflicts, you are evolving, your habits change, your standards rise, your tolerance for nonsense disappears. The best response to disrespect is not revenge or arguments, it's becoming so aligned with your goals that the old triggers no longer reach you. For example, imagine someone constantly belittles your ambitions and tries to bait you into defending your choices. Instead of arguing, you stop engaging and put that energy into improving your skills and consistency. Months later, your progress is visible, and the conversation never even happens again. You didn't prove a point. You outgrew the need to. Consistency is one of the most underestimated forms of power when dealing with toxic people. You don't need to confront, accuse, or expose anyone for who they are. In fact, doing so often pulls you into unnecessary drama and makes you look reactive. When you remain calm, respectful, and firm every single time, you create a steady mirror. Over time, that mirror reflects people's true intentions back to the world. Consistency removes confusion. It is housed that your behavior is not emotional, temporary, or dependent on mood. It's rooted in self-respect. Toxic people rely on inconsistency. They push boundaries one day and act friendly the next, hoping to keep you off balance. They test reactions to see what they can get away with when you respond differently every time. Sometimes emotional, sometimes silent, sometimes forgiving. You unknowingly teach them how to manipulate you. Consistency shuts that down. When your response is always grounded, predictable, and aligned with your standards, manipulation stops working. They can't provoke you into slipping, and that frustrates them. What's powerful about consistency is that it lets behavior speak louder than words. You don't need to announce that someone is disrespectful. You simply don't reward disrespect with access, attention, or emotional energy. When you don't react, argue, or chase closure, toxic people often reveal themselves by escalating. They become louder, more aggressive, or more obvious because they've lost control. Others begin to notice the contrast between your calm presence and their unstable behavior. You didn't expose them, they exposed themselves. This mindset also keeps your hands clean. You stay aligned with your values while letting time do the work. Staying respectful doesn't mean staying available. Staying calm doesn't mean staying passive. It means you respond the same way every time, with boundaries, composure, and self-control. That kind of discipline builds internal confidence. You begin to trust yourself because you know you won't abandon your standards just because someone tries to push your buttons. The real goal isn't to be seen as right, it's to be at peace. When you stay consistent, you stop wasting energy managing perceptions. You stop trying to convince others of your truth. You focus on growth, clarity, and forward motion. Eventually, people either adjust their behavior or remove themselves. Both outcomes protect your peace. For example, imagine a friend who constantly makes sarcastic remarks and then says they're just joking. Instead of calling them out emotionally one day and laughing it off the next, you consistently respond with calm distance and limit engagement. Over time, their jokes become sharper, more noticeable, and uncomfortable for others. You stayed steady. They revealed themselves. And without drama, you outgrew the situation. Here's the truth: respecting yourself in front of toxic people is a mindset shift from reaction to mastery. You stop asking why they like this and start saying this no longer deserves access to me. When you walk with self-respect, you don't need to raise your voice, prove your worth, or seek revenge. Your peace becomes your power. Your discipline becomes your statement. And your growth becomes the loudest message they will ever hear. Stay solid, stay focused. Respect yourself first. Everything else follows.